Hello, thank you for joining us for the board meeting this evening. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. You will see a questions feature on the right if you're on a desktop. Please use that to send us any public comment. The public comments will come directly to me. This is Margaret Holler, the Manager of Marketing and Public Relations, and I will read them to the board at the appropriate time. I'm going to turn it over to President Harrington to start the meeting.
Good evening. I now call to order the regular board meeting of the Park Ridge Park District Board of Commissioners. Today is Thursday, May 7th, and the time is 7:02 p.m. May we now do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Coyne?
Here.
Commissioner Grau?
Here.
Commissioner LeDuc? Here. Commissioner Leach?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Here.
Commissioner Harrington?
Here. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add, amend, or delete to our current agenda? I'll give a little time for delay here. Hearing none, let's now move on to public comments on non-agenda items. Hearing none, let's move ahead. I'd like to turn it over to our, well, I have a small item to report on. It's more of just to talk with my fellow commissioners briefly. This is the traditional time of year where we begin discussing board roles for the next board year. At our next meeting, we will have the ability to discuss amongst ourselves to form consensus to set forth board roles. So I know we'll be having some IOMA respected conversations and have already started to have those as far as where each of us would like to serve next year. So look forward to having some additional conversation before we all meet again at our next meeting to do the changing of the board. Anyone have any questions or anything they want to comment on about that? All right, now I get to turn it over to Executive Director Mountcastle.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I have quite a lengthy report on the COVID-19 updates. Before I get into that, I've asked Manager Holler to give us the survey results and just a recap the entire survey regarding our closure and COVID is in the packet. And I had asked Margaret to go through and just give a quick summary of those results. So I'm going to have her do that first.
Margaret, okay, thank you. We had 193 people take the survey. Not everyone answered all the questions because there was logic built into the survey that would skip questions based on someone's response. Of those that like our Park District Facebook page, about 40% have noticed the Park Ridge Plays in Place campaign, and about 30% of those respondents are engaging with the campaign in some way. Of those engaging with the campaign, the majority find the videos engaging, informative, and appropriate for their family. They are neutral about actually doing the activities, but agree the campaign should continue through the stay-at-home order. Much fewer of the respondents like the STAR Facebook group or the Centennial Fitness Center Facebook group. But of those that do, they strongly agree that the activities posted on those pages should continue and that video workouts should be included. The Centennial Activity Center has been making check-in calls to members, and members would like that to continue on an every other week frequency. 75% of our respondents of the survey indicated that they are likely or very likely to return to in-person programs this summer once reopened, and 84% are likely or very likely to return to the facilities this summer once they're reopened. Comments included the need to know safety measures, restrictions on number of people, social distancing, and the need to wear masks. There were a few outliers on both ends of the spectrum, to people being very excited to get back to their normal recreation activities, to others being very concerned about participating in anything until fall or even next year. We asked what will be most important to you when coming back to the Park District facilities after the stay-at-home order is lifted. Some did reiterate their comments about health and safety measures, restrictions on the number of people, social distancing, cleaning practices, the need to wear masks, and having kids frequently wash their hands. But we were surprised that many others responded with the activity that they are most looking forward to participating in again, which included Centennial Activity Center activities, the pools, tennis and basketball courts, the fitness center, and the ice rink. Regarding the willingness to participate in fee-based virtual classes during the closure, 47% said no, 35% were unsure, and 16% said yes. Most were interested in fitness workouts, with yoga mentioned often. The vast majority of respondents indicated that our frequency of emails were just right, and about 90% said that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the Park District's overall communications efforts during the closure. So happy to take any other questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Gail.
Any questions on the survey results? Okay.
This
go
is
ahead.
Commissioner Rao. I was just thinking that the work we're doing at the pool will help with the cleanliness feeling if we get to open up over there. So that's good.
Oh, yes, the locker room project.
Right.
Yeah, good. Okay, like I said, I've got a pretty lengthy report and I'm sure there'll be questions. So please just speak up if you want me to stop, and I can do so. I'm going to talk a little bit about background of some things that have been going on behind the scenes, talk about May and with the new order, and then talk about the future. So I'll just go ahead and get started. As all of us know, the stay-at-home order was extended through May 30th by Governor Pritzker. The only change affecting park districts, and not our park district, was golf. The golf is allowed. I just wanted to point out that this order is a law, and therefore we have been advised that it needs to be followed in all regards, because there's been some questions about opening up different facilities that were not listed. On May 5th, we received, which is just a couple days ago, we received the Restore Illinois guidelines from the governor. And so we have been working through those and, reading some more particulars. However, it has been stated that the Illinois Department of Public Health will be giving further direction on several of the orders relating to not just us, but other organizations and businesses. We have not received any further direction at this point. The IDPH further direction, like I said, will affect our operations and services to the public. So this new order follows 5 phases, and in the federal order, of course, just followed 3. So we're currently in phase 2 that continues the stay-at-home order. As I said, golf is allowed, but not driving ranges. I had several conversations with our leadership legal team at IAPD and several others about driving ranges, and also received some written communication about that. But it is determined, the reason that driving ranges are not allowed is it's determined as a public amusement facility, and it's not allowed to open at this time. Park use did not change. It's allowed for biking, hiking, and walking. We have received, and I'm sure some of you have as well, I know President Harrington has, a lot of requests for tennis to open. As much as we want to open tennis, it is not listed as allowable in the governor's plan. Further, DECIO said in a correspondence to a legislator that no tennis is in this phase. The sharing of equipment seems to be the big concern. However, there's a lot of interpretations on this, and there are districts that are opening their tennis courts. Paderma, we were on a workshop, very, very helpful workshop on Tuesday, where Paderma clarified that agencies should be very cautious if they're deciding to open something that was not listed as okay for opening. Even though the order, like I said, they didn't really give a definitive answer on tennis, but they didn't put it as allowable. Some of the comments from Paderma that we would potentially be open to liability if we were to open this facility that is closed by the order. Could be fines and penalties to the district as well. So I wanted to clarify that on tennis because I know there's a lot of interest, and trust me, we want to open our facilities as well. Go ahead.
Sorry, Gail. I was going to say, can we perhaps take commissioner questions on that right now, since we're kind of talking about tennis, the driving range, and perhaps other May amenities that folks may be getting questions on?
Yes.
Just wanted, if any other commissioners had questions as to some of those comments.
I have a question or comment, if you wouldn't mind. It's Commissioner Leach. Is that okay?
Go for it. Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you. So I would love for us to open up, regardless of Paderma's guidance, singles for tennis, single play for tennis. I believe Schaumburg, maybe some of the other districts you referenced, Scale, there'll be tennis for single players. But I do not believe it puts us at undue risk for many of the things I've read as well on it. And it gets, again, the public back out doing healthy exercise. I like the idea of at least single tennis to be considered. That's all I had.
Anybody else have any comments on that?
Not on tennis, on the driving range, but I expressed many of those in an email, I think, to you last week.
Right.
Our driving range is perfectly set up for social distancing. And other than the handling of the golf balls, which I think the golf balls are run through a machine after each pickup anyway, I don't see any reason. We have a gate to keep people out. We can control the number of people that are coming in. We can control the contact. I mean, the person, the attendant there is behind a glass shield, just like at Trader Joe's. I fail to see. I understand what the rule says, and I appreciate that you have to abide by the laws that are set forth. And whatever you decide on it, I'm sure will be thought out. But I'm sort of with Commissioner Leach on this. I'm a little less concerned about what Paderma thinks about the matter, and more concerned about, can we do something that makes a lot of sense, gives people an opportunity to get outside, and still has minimal risk of spreading the coronavirus, which of course is what we're all about. So those are my comments. It's not really a question, I guess, but I just want to go on record as saying that I think that particular rule is draconian in the sense that it paints with this broad brush that any driving range can't be open, and we happen to have a driving range that is perfectly set up for individuals to come in one at a time and to be spaced out. And that's just a shame.
So I would love to make some comments now. Gail, I really appreciate all the work that you and the staff have done and working with our attorneys and kind of culling through all this guidance, because I really feel like as a board commissioner and as an executive director and staff, that our responsibility right now is to look at that guidance and follow that guidance. As much as I would like my son to be with me out on the tennis courts right now, because I do believe that, you know, we could take precautions and we could be very socially distanced and bring our Clorox wipes and wash down. We have to look at that guidance. And the guidance currently does not consider tennis as an essential activity from my reading of DCEO's guidance and from Senator Welch's question to them. And while we know that some other districts are making some different decisions, I have a lot of concern going against guidance that's been provided to us from a state agency as well as PDERMA. I'd love to hear, I know Dirk, I think you said Dirk is on. I'd love to hear from our attorney specifically on tennis, because believe me, I think we're all wringing our hands to try to provide amenities and opportunities, because we're all living the shelter in place and the desire to get out and engage in some more normal activities during this crisis. But I'd love to hear from Dirk on that fact, as far as what the guidance does say and how he would advise us as a board to consider that. And I also understand from Commissioner Coyne's point of view of, we have this beautiful driving range where we think as commissioners we could set up, you know, work with staff and set up some arrangement to socially distance. But in that case, I'm pretty certain that driving ranges are specifically called out as not allowable right now for the month of May. But I just want to clarify that again, as you mentioned, Gail, with Dirk, to make sure we have that, I have that right from my understanding.
Hi, it's Margaret. Unfortunately, Dirk signed in as an attendee instead of the email with the panelists. I am not able to upgrade him to a panelist. So if he could hear me, I would really appreciate it if he goes to his email. I resent the email to him, and if he could click that link so he could join the meeting as a panelist, so we're able to have him speak. All the attendees are muted, and this system does not let us unmute somebody that's an attendee.
And while that is hopefully happening, this, you know, there's the driving range, correct. Those were called out. I don't disagree with the fact that we want to get people out in these facilities. I want that just as much as you. And the public amusement facility, I debated that with not debated. I had a great discussion with our attorney from IAPD. He is hearing that from several people. And I asked specifically who at the governor's office I could talk to about that, because I agree it does not make sense for our driving range. And he said that IAPD is communicating these concerns for us, and that they're talking to the chief of staff at the governor's office. And that is, you know, so that's a law. And if the board wanted to decide to open it, we would be going against a law, and that would be our choice. But then there's also the coverage issue, right? So I would not recommend that at all. The tennis courts, it seems to be more of a, you know, that we got advice on that as well. But there are park districts that are doing it because it's not listed. And again, PDERMA, yes, they just give us advice, but they also cover us. And so that I have to listen to that and say that to protect the district, that I'm not comfortable at this time with that. And I know other districts that use our attorney's firm are doing it, but I'm trying to be very, you know, the PDERMA, when they say you need to be very cautious, and it could potentially open us up to liability. I did not mention the third thing they said that if you open a facility that is not allowable, I said there could be fines and penalties to the district, but they also said there could be potential personal liability to the commissioners. So I can certainly talk to them if we want to push this and get further information from them. And I'll also talk to Dirk about it, but this advice is coming from PDERMA that I got, and then also from DECIO. or from DCEO advice to a legislator. So that would be my response to those two items.
I think additionally, I'll turn on my webcam here. I think additionally, all during this time, we see new guidance coming out almost every other day, right?
Right.
Whether it be in a different bulletin from Illinois Department of Public Health. I know we're waiting on that for pools, which you'll talk about. We see, DCEO getting involved, on tennis and other. So I feel like we're living this in real time, and appreciate you kind of working through and making these decisions as we go, essentially, as we see clearer guidance, we get new insight into what's allowed and what's not.
Right. Yes, thank you.
Well,
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Am I on?
Yes. Yes.
Hello. Good evening.
Hi, Dirk. Hi, Dirk.
So on tennis, so here's the thing, which is, a number of those districts that are open are Ansel-Glink districts that are open for tennis. And here's how we step through it, and it comes down to a decision each unit of government is making. Gail's outlined all the risks and all the concerns. But key to the order is that it describes the park district itself as an essential unit of government, and the order says that you alone determine what is essential to fulfill your mission. So the DCEO guidance about businesses does not apply to you other than to act as guidance for how you exercise your judgment about what your particular concern for risk is. So our advice at Ansel-Glink has been, we're not going to defy the order. So I've had park districts come to us and ask us, in sort of the sense of challenging the governor, forget it, we're putting 4 people on carts out on the course. And we've said, no, that you're defying the order, and at that point you're actually engaged in an illegal action, and there's no insurance coverage for illegal intentional acts. However, when it comes to tennis, the other thing that guides us, the one thing that Gail hasn't mentioned that is in the back of PDERMA's mind, is the other check and balance on what we do is the court system. And we have tort immunity for people being injured or getting hurt or doing things while they're recreating, provided we're not wanton and reckless. And so the question becomes, under the current medical science, what does it mean to be wanton and reckless? 2 people in a boat, where it's unlikely that they might share equipment, but there's no guarantee. So we've got 2 people in a boat is permitted under the current science as described by the order. 2 people in a boat. And so on the other hand, driving ranges, and I agree with the frustration there, that's really about Top Golf, frankly. That's the reason that they're included. It's not because you could, every other bay or the way yours is set up is perfect for social distance. They don't care. They threw the baby out with the bathwater on that. But putting greens, too many uncontrolled people, too close a proximity, because we're not sharing a ball on a putting green. We're not sharing a putter. So it's not about shared equipment. It's about proximity of the people. So that's your spectrum, if you will, of 2 people on a boat. Okay. Too many, 4 or 5 people all gathered on a putting green next to each other, even with masks, not okay. So what do we do? How do we differentiate? And from our perspective, since possible sharing of equipment is okay on a boat, and you're not sharing equipment around a putting green, that wasn't the determining factor necessarily. It's a concern to be considered, obviously, but it's not determinative in given what the science has said to us about it. We want to avoid touching if we can. That's why you don't pull the flag anymore. That's why there are no ball washers for golf, all that stuff. Nevertheless, it's a little bit of inconsistency there. So playing singles tennis, that's perfectly the same distance as a boat or more. Even doubles tennis in that regard. And then the key was for any of our districts that opened, and there are plenty of districts that aren't ours that did open tennis as well. But we've insisted on signage about, if you don't observe the social distancing, if you don't, while you're waiting, if you don't, if you're not wearing masks while you're waiting, if you can't avoid the social distancing, if it's inevitable going through and out of the gate, you need to have masks. And if you don't do it right, then we're going to turn the car around and go home and shut it down again. And that has worked for our districts. Over the last weekend when it was beautiful out, there were no reports of people getting out of hand, or even the waits. People were cordial. They were separated. We didn't even get the usual number of tattletale calls that we get across the system and how to deal with those. Because, you know, there are only 7 in the whole state that have their own police departments. So everybody else has to rely on intergovernmental relationships with their municipality about how to deal with the people who call about enforcement. So when it comes to tennis, our advice has been it comes down to the particular unit of government, and you as the commissioners get to make that final policy call about what's essential. Paderma hasn't outright banned it. They haven't said there's no coverage. They've explained all the risks. We're entitled to immunities as long as we're not reckless. And I've talked to Ed about this, Ed Dutton. And, you know, when it comes to tennis, particularly if you're only allowing singles and you've got signage and all the rest, you're not wanton and reckless. You're 2 people in a boat. And so that's how it's been approached, and that's how people got to tennis. And so while, you know, the pressure to open is obviously there, and then there's also the pressure to even go farther. But that was our advice on tennis, was that there was elbow room within the order for units of government to do it.
Right. Yes, they're putting us in, as Dirk said, they're putting us in precarious situations here, right, with all these different interpretations. But, you know, the districts that I've talked to as well that have decided, there's several on the other side of that aren't doing it because of the fact that there's other issues. Once you open those courts, people start using them for other purposes. And then we will get the pressure once we open tennis to why are we not opening the basketball courts? Why are we not opening the skate park? Why are we not opening, you know, the list goes on and on. So absolutely, I'm open to it. It's been, you know, gone back and forth where I turned the corner on it and, you know, really thought it was not a good idea is when Paderma said to be very cautious. And Paderma is not the end all be all, but you know, we can also potentially be open to liability even though we're covered by tort. So I think if the commissioners want us to open tennis, we can open tennis.
So Dirk, how does that work with basketball, and how does that work with the skate park? I mean, are those expressly prohibited, or do they seem to be falling under the same consideration as you're sharing with tennis? Because you can technically social distance in a group of 2 from the same family in the with basketball courts, but we've closed them and we've chosen to keep those closed. So I guess I'm curious to know where the line is.
Well, there is no bright line because, again, the guidance we're having to pick from examples, but they're far more like the putting green, where by their very nature of their activity, there aren't rules around where you're playing the activity. Like in tennis, you're confined to a court and you're on each side of a net, so for singles. Whereas skating in a skate park is like the putting green. You can walk all around it and you'll be proximate to people in a way that's not controlled by the rules of the activity. That's the same with the basketball or volleyball. We had to shut down a couple places that are allowing tennis had to shut down volleyball because, again, now you're getting group activity together as opposed to individuals, 2 in a boat. If you think of the spectrum of 2 in a boat's okay, people around a putting green isn't because of how they interact by the very nature of the activity. That's why basketball hoops are still down, and that's why a skate park would still be down. There's no controlling, actually, through the rules of the game, the expectation of where people will be.
This is Commissioner Leach again. I would love to get the board's consensus on opening up tennis courts for single use.
This is Commissioner Coyne, and I just want to make sure that I just I think I gathered everything there, but I'm not always that quick on the uptake. The driving range is explicitly prohibited, so that's why we can't really do anything, because we would be basically committing an illegal act, and then we would have no protection whatsoever from either through PRODERMA or tort liability, because we're committing an illegal activity. But the tennis, just to simplify things, tennis doesn't fall into that expressly prohibited category. So we could do that at the risk of spreading the disease, and also making it maybe more difficult to police and that sort of thing. Is that a correct assessment of the difference between the two?
Yes, that's right. And further, again, this is about the check and balance on the basis of the medical science. I know that people are frustrated with the governor's science, his modeling. I know that in the press conferences, people are asking for that data, not all of which has been shared by the governor, but they're after the model. One of the problems we have then in looking at what the science, they're claiming to base these rules on science, and so do we have any countervailing science to say, oh no, you can have a group of 4 people playing volleyball, and we don't. And so we have to rely on that science. So in addition to what you've said about, yes, it's expressly prohibited for when it comes to the driving ranges, because the order picked up those rules expressly. So that's within the order, that you can't have a driving range. Tennis is outside the order. We're looking at guidance not only on the science, but also all the things Gail's already reviewed. All of those have to be considered, and where people come down is a matter of policy and risk about that. But I do think you'd always have insurance coverage, and I don't know how anybody would possibly be able to prove it, and unless you've exactly violated the law purely and simply deliberately, you know, you're entitled to all those benefits on the doubt on proof too. So that's what goes into the thinking. So yes, you've got it correctly. I just want to add that business about we've only got really the science promoted by the governor to guide us, and so we're stuck with that because we're not going to go out and get our own experts.
Right. Right. I mean, trust me, I'm fine if we open it. I'm just laying out, what all the different, the different pros and cons are with opening one amenity versus another in our community too, because I think the commissioners and the park district will start getting pressure on the other amenities once we open one. Is that a reason not to open one? That's a decision we all have to make, right? So I am certainly open to it, and I just need that direction.
This is Commissioner Grau. I initially thought that tennis should not have been closed. I still feel like it would be nice to have it open, but I have to say that I don't feel like our community is obeying the rules now. So, if you say singles only on the tennis court, I saw a full-fledged soccer game up here at Northeast Park on Sunday. So, right. I'm less inclined now, even though I feel like tennis should be allowed.
This is Commissioner Coyne, and I hear that sort of thing that Commissioner Grau just said all the time, and I understand it, I think, completely, and sometimes agree with it, but we can't create by creating more rules, or not, in this case, choosing to relax a rule, should not be based on the fact that people won't obey the law. If they're not obeying the law now, then what difference does it make if the rule is there or not? Just unlock the tennis courts and tell them you're not supposed to do it, but then let them do it. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I think I feel that the tennis court issue, much like Commissioner Leach said, Gail, if you thought in your heart that this was a very risky thing, and that based on all the science that you've been looking at, probably deeper than any of the commissioners have, that this should not happen because it is a risky thing, I would respect that opinion, and I think you would have brought that forth. You're looking for guidance from us, and my opinion is that if we put up the proper signage that reminds people about social distancing at the tennis courts, and that while you're waiting, and that you may be asked to leave if you're not obeying the social distancing guidelines, then I think we should open them up. That's my thought, and I'll shut up.
To respond to that, I'm not a scientist and I don't play one on TV. No, I'm not a scientist, but I am just listening to, we wanted to open them, as of last Friday when that, or whenever the Friday was when that order came out. But then we talked it through as a staff, and it came down to, and I thought the DCEO had more weight than what Dirk is saying. And I think that we were just concerned, knowing our community, some of the just what's it going to create. And then the whole, you're just increasing the risk. And then when I heard that from Paderma, that kind of solidified it for me. But again, there's risk in a lot of things we do. And I know people are anxious to get out there. Trust me, I get it. So I just really I don't know if I have the answer if the commissioners are willing to take the risk. What I wanted to say, my babbling, I wanted to say is that we won't be monitoring this, because that's not what we're supposed to, we're not going to be out there monitoring. We've been instructed not to be out there, trying to be the police on this. It will increase the job of the police, and I'm sure that they may have something to say about that too, but that's just, I wanted to add that in there, that we will not be out at those courts policing if people are playing singles or doubles.
Do we have any data on this? Do we know how many park districts have decided to open their courts, and how is it going? Do we know?
No, I mean, I just know from my discussions with directors, and there's no, there hasn't been any survey put out, because everybody's dealing with these decisions as they come, Jim. And so there's not surveys on this type of thing. It's just more, people hearing it, people talking to peers. I know Arlington Heights is not opening theirs. Northbrook is not opening theirs. I mean, I have a list, but there's several that have. Skokies has been open since the beginning. So, it's just, I don't have data on how it's going either, so to answer your question. Unless any of the other staff does. I do not.
Well, perhaps before we make a
question. Go ahead.
It would be worthwhile having a better understanding of that.
Understanding of what though, Jim? I'm sorry, this is Commissioner Coyne. You said, how's it going? That's pretty general. You mean, are you asking whether or not anybody could possibly know that opening up tennis courts has contributed to the spread of coronavirus? Is that what you need to know, or no?
No.
Okay.
No. I'd be interested to know if we knew around our surrounding communities, and we would be in a distinct minority of keeping our courts closed, then I would say, we really ought to consider that. On the other hand, if it's the other way around, we should consider that as well. Or where I was at with how is it going is, if in some of these communities they've opened up their tennis courts and found out that they have mass gatherings at tennis courts and had to close them again, that would be worth knowing as well.
Okay.
Well, Gail set the spectrum correctly. There are a number of park districts who never took their nets down and never locked their gates. I know of about 4 or 5 of them. Skokie being closest one I'm aware of to you, and I know of 3 others that are a little further away, west, south of you. The ones that have added over the weekend after the order came out, none of them have called us to say they're closing them back up after we walked through the decision. Some people decided to, after we walked through exactly what I've just done with you, essentially, some decided to stay closed. others opened, and none of the ones that have opened have called us back to say, you know, they're closing again. So, but it's just been one weekend. You know, it was not the greatest week for outdoor play, and certainly this weekend won't be either. So.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at my thread. Oak Brook is closed. I know that Glencoe, as of this week, was closed. I know they're not our neighbor. Like I said, Northbrook is remaining closed as of, you know, my latest information. That's what I know at this time. I mean, there's others that I know I've talked to. So, you know, I don't, you know, I don't think we're going to find that out in time to, because a lot of these, like Dirk said, have just opened. And, you know, I really don't think we're going to find out about behavior. I would assume it's going to be the behavior that, you know, some people are going to follow the rules and some aren't, right? That's how it kind of seems to work.
Right. To that point, one of the park districts that walked through it, and they decided to remain closed, but have 3 times had to have people go over and let people out of locked courts who jumped the fence and then couldn't get out. So, I mean, that's how crazy it gets. Even if you lock your fence, you have the people who will jump it and whatever.
Right.
So that's exactly the people are going to disobey.
And somebody I heard in a community that has this closed, somebody took a bolt cutter to their lock as well. So, you know, it's not just us. It has, not that anybody's done that I know of yet, but.
Well,
so.
that's true. And also there's a suit against the Park District of Highland Park claiming a constitutional right to play tennis. So that's the full amount of the spectrum right there.
Right.
Oh, boy.
So yeah, this is what our life is right now. So again, I won't be upset if we try it, and if it doesn't work, we can lock them up again if that's the consensus of the board. So I would just need to know that.
Well, this is Commissioner Leduc, and I mean, I tend to err on the side of caution, especially, you know, as a former attorney, liability is always something that's at the forefront of my mind. One thing that I feel like would make me more comfortable with it is if the tennis courts had, if we could do some sort of waiver prominently placed with large print, so we could at least say that if someone later did try to make some claim, which granted, I mean, how, okay, prove it, but just sort of as an additional CYA, if I would be more comfortable if there was some sort of large waiver posted stating that, okay, if you choose to use these tennis courts, you agree to waive your right to suit regard, you know, in relation to said usage.
Right, it's a warning. You put up a giant warning sign. That's as Commissioner Leduc knows, and that's exactly right. You know, they're not all activities you can control or prevent. So then the question becomes, did you have a duty then to warn about the risks? And we do that. We're in that business. We know how to warn about risks. And so others have done that. They've added that to their signage, those that have opened it. But in warning, you play at your own risk of contagion. And then also the other social distancing rules that are now required, in addition to the usual rules you've probably got posted at your courts already. So, so adding signage, including a giant red warning sign that says, you know, play is at your own risk, including the risk of contracting, you know, any communicable disease.
Because, yeah, I mean, like Commissioner Grau, you know, I go to Centennial Park frequently, and there has been yet to be a time where I've gone there where I haven't seen at least somebody not following the social distancing practices. And, you know, the warmer the weather, the more people you see not following social distancing. And I mean, just today I had to scold a couple teenage boys who were up on the playground equipment and just kind of ask them to disembark. So yeah, like I said, I would not be comfortable with reopening the tennis courts without some sort of waiver or warning prominently displayed and large.
I think what Dirk is talking about is a warning and not a waiver, correct, Dirk? I mean, we can't have a waiver out there.
Yeah, you're not going to get a waiver implies the signed,
Right.
I'm doing that. The warning is we warned you about it and you decided to take the risk yourself. So that's
Right, I
that
mean,
would be
because
a
obviously
warning.
without an attendant, we can't be handing people, there's nobody there to hand them an official waiver, but
Exactly. Yeah.
definitely something saying a play at your own risk sign to me is necessary.
Dirk, this is Commissioner Harrington.
This is,
I guess I'm still having a hard time understanding when I read through Restore Illinois and I look at phase 2 and I look at the outlined activities that the governor, IDPH, and scientists have put forth as to how we are able to kind of work through a return to normal through each of these phases as we're still in crisis mode. It talks about outdoor recreation. Walking, hiking, and biking permitted. Select state parks are open. Boating and fishing permitted. Golf courses open, all with IDPH approved safety guidance. And then when I read the DCEO response to Senator Welch around tennis for sporting businesses, it talks about the high probability of exposure through tennis. So I guess I'm having a hard time understanding how this falls within the discretion of individual units of government and individual park districts. And so does this fall within the discretion of the country club, for instance, and their tennis courts, or TAM nearby us and their tennis courts? Can you please explain to me again where this is discretionary?
Because it's not actually forbidden. DCEO has said it's not essential for those businesses, and the country clubs are a business. The part of the order that's still valid that he re-signed and put out there is that every unit of local government has the ability to make that decision about what is an essential function. Unlike driving ranges, tennis courts are not officially banned as an activity. You have to figure out whether or not you can conduct that activity on your outdoor facilities in any safe manner. And that's the decision that's left to the individual unit. They've done the same thing with beaches, for example. Every unit of government that has a beach to your east looking for guidance, they have said it's up to you as a unit of government what you want to do. That is a consistent refrain from IDPH to them about, we may not give you a license to allow swimming off your beach, but it is up to you to decide whether or not you're going to allow anybody to walk on the beach. Even though the state of Illinois has closed their beaches, IDNR has closed theirs, they have nevertheless let every unit of government, Gail mentioned Glencoe, let every unit of government decide whether they're going to open their beach or not. So they have made elbow room for units of government like you to make decisions that they're not allowing private entities, or that they're not making for themselves because of manpower, staffing, and whatever other concerns they may have. And so that's where there's room for discretion. It's in across the board modeling of how they've made decisions. They've allowed the units of government to make those decisions for themselves on things where, even though they've made a contrary one. And I like the beaches where that's walking, and the outdoor activity that they cited, being in a boat together, until it's expressly prohibited, then we say it leaves you room to make your decision. Now, as you read it, Commissioner Harrington, that's a fair reading of the cautions to be taken, that they see that they raise for you the risk of doing this. The question is, what others have asked is, are you willing to allow people to make that risk decision for themselves, or do you want to close the courts? As we said, reasonable people can disagree about this and what they can do, but there is no flat prohibition against you doing it.
hey, this is Commissioner Tunnel. Hello. I was just going to say that I think we all take an implied risk every time we go out in public nowadays, and it would be nice to see the amenity responsibly used. And I agree with Commissioner LeDuc as far as if the risk is pointed out, I would be all for opening in the situation we discussed. Thank you.
Okay, so we will be opening the tennis courts. Do we want to move on? I heard 4 people. Commissioner Coyne, Leach, Tunnel, and Leduc that are okay with opening the tennis courts. Is that correct?
Well, I am only okay if there is a prominently displayed warning posted. Otherwise, I'm a no.
Same for us. Thank you.
Okay. Just so you know that this will not happen. We'll have to have time to put up signage, and I'll have to talk to staff about the logistics of that. So we will do this as soon as we can, and we'll make sure we announce it to the residents at that time, hopefully within the next couple days or
Great.
early next week. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on from tennis.
Gail, can I ask one thing to that note, though?
Sure.
I think it's really important as we're making these decisions to communicate with the police department and the city and others to let them know about the board
Of
decision.
course.
So I think that'd be really helpful as they're trying to help us during this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All righty. I'll move on. So speaking of that, my next topic was enforcing, the use of the park and the closure of the park. The PDERMA did reinforce when there's an issue, we should defer to the police, which we've known, and our staff should not interact or enforce this as it's a state law. And interacting and enforcing this puts our staff and commissioners at risk. I don't think I have to remind you of the park ranger that got pushed into the water at a state park. I think it was over the weekend. So I just advise you on that, and on when you get the calls, because I know you're getting, the calls and the complaints. These are police matters because it is a law. All right, moving on. May, we have sent out that notice that all, due to the order, our park district programs and events are canceled, unfortunately, in May. Just wanted to remind the board that there are certain staff reporting physically to work with grass cutting, the grounds, capital projects, building mechanicals, and at Wohlers Hall when needed. The majority of the full-time staff continues to telework from home. We do have furloughs that are ongoing for full and part-time staff. These are continuing due to no work in their area of responsibility. There's been some minor adjustments to those furloughs during the month of May. And I certainly wanted to reiterate the fact that we empathize and we empathize with all of our team members who continue to be affected by this pandemic and the effects on their employment. So this is very difficult for us as we move through this. Speaking of moving through it, we're transitioning to opening up the park district. The goal is, as we work through, the puzzle and the myriad of decisions we have to make, is safety and financial considerations for all of the scenarios that we are looking at. We're working on a very detailed operational manual for return to work procedures for staff and opening safety procedures and standards for our facilities. And we will not open until these are in place. We have a lot of great examples again, and we have so many resources between our attorneys and PDERMA and a varied amount of communities across the nation that have been through this as their states open up before ours. Some of the safety issue, things at the facilities are what you're seeing all over the place. The barriers at the front desk, the sanitizing supplies and equipment, the protocol in classes with the doors open, and I could go on and on. So we are working very hard, and we have teams working on all of those items. The direction to the staff in terms of programming for the summer is that we are reviewing each and every program and facility and event with the criteria given to us by the governor's order, which, as most people know, are groups of 10 in our current situation and in the next phase, groups of 50 in phase 4 of the Restore Illinois plan. And then we're also looking at what we can offer outdoors and what we can offer virtually. So we're doing modeling, and I just wanted to also remind the board and, talk about the fact that I've also given direction on other cost saving measures for helping with the financial situation that we are in with no program and facility revenue to the district. Last meeting, we talked about postponing capital. I sent you out the revised dollar amount once we looked at a couple of the items we had talked about at the last meeting. And so that takes us to $760,000 of capital improvements that have been identified and discussed with the board on postponement. I have instituted a hiring freeze on all full-time positions, including not filling 3 current vacant positions. We have, as you know, we've got all of our seasonal part-time employees, which is approximately 600 employees, and then 23% of our full-time employees who are currently furloughed. These are fluid decisions, and they're changing based on work available, based on the order. I've instructed the staff at all levels that we're essential spending only. All conferences have been canceled, and our national conference that there's a handful of us that go to in the fall, that's already been canceled, and there's not many out-of-state things that we go to. I know that there was also a conference a financial conference this month that's been canceled. We're also, in addition to that, we're all reviewing the current operating expenses for 2020 and cutting these where we can as we look at this model. So after all of these things are done, the administrative team will review the plans submitted by all the managers for their operational areas and determine if the whole picture, what that looks like. And then does this support a financially responsible plan for the summer? And also, how does it look for our end of the year projections, understanding it's all estimates at this point. We provided when we in March, or I think it was the April meeting, some estimates, and now we're trying to dig in and give some more reality with the facts that we know at this time. We will be able to present that to the board when it is available. We're shooting, I think the next meeting might be tight, but we're doing everything we can as fast as we can to get there. It's like doing a whole new budget and a whole new summer brochure in 2 to 3 weeks. So we are moving forward. Let's talk a little bit about moving forward. We're planning and trying to get it out to the public as best as we can in monthly increments. In general, there'll be further changes throughout these months based on the different days when we get the IDPH direction, because we don't know when it comes. We had no indication or no warning that this governor was going to come out with Restore Illinois on Tuesday. So we have to react quickly and make these decisions from, right away from that after we get all the information. So what does June look like? Right now, we are working on a digital brochure of new virtual classes that will go to the public on May 22nd. That's going to include virtual programs for June. Once all of the summer offerings are determined, an updated digital version of our summer brochure will be made available. That will include in-person, virtual, and outdoor activities. In terms of camp, there's a lot more detail going on. I shouldn't say a lot more detail, but there's that might take another week or so, but we will send out a message hopefully next week on where we're going with camp. We'll also have a new digital brochure with camps. They're going to look different, and we'll include a combination of in-person and virtual camp experiences. A few of the changes that are happening, that we'll have groups of 8 campers, because the limit in stage 3 is the next stage we're going to go into is 10 people in a group. So we'll have 2 staff and 8 kids. There won't be field trips or swimming. And our goal is to begin camps in mid-June. Does anybody have any questions so far of what I've said? For June, we also have to cancel, unfortunately, all of our, all festivals, concerts, and rentals consisting above 10 people.
Gail, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I had a question on the camp plan as you've outlined to date. So do we have a certain capacity? I know we're talking about needing to ensure appropriate spacing indoors and outdoors for these camps. So about how many campers could we even potentially accommodate under those under 10 rules?
I'm gonna let April jump in on that.
Hello. We're currently working on that with both indoor and outdoor options. So we're working on the square footage of each space and figuring out how many campers we can accommodate, and also trying to work through the outdoor spaces and have some options for outdoor camps as well that would potentially be canceled if it rains, because we wouldn't have backup locations. So right now, we're still working through the numbers based on the square footage, and that also depends on if and when certain facilities can open. For example, if we are allowed to use the fitness center space for camps and open that accordingly, we would like to do that. And it also depends on, if we're allowed to have more than 10 children in a space like the fitness center. So we're working through the numbers for indoor, outdoor, and virtual, but we're gonna maximize the space that we can based on the square footage.
Have you looked at the financial plan accordingly to determine
That's what we're working on currently.
So the goal would be under the new guidelines from Restore Illinois that after May 28th, and you said mid-June, that the goal would be to open these camps with the 10 and under rules.
The goal would hopefully be to start camps on the day that they were intended to begin.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. So, yeah, we're looking for definition on this groups of 10. We don't, we're hoping it's going to be groups of 10 within different rooms, such as Main Park or the fitness center. But, obviously if it was just 10 in the entire building, that's not going to work, right? So again, we're just trying to, and then some facilities, we're not clear if they're going to let us, all the facilities be open in June. And so those are some of the challenges, some of the many challenges, but we are doing everything we can to run camp, right? So as we said,
are there masks required? Are there temperatures required to be taken, or advice to parents saying if your child presents with a fever? I'm just, as we're working through, as adults return to work here from a lot of us working remotely and other, I know that employers are going through significant thought processes and plans as far as for staff safety and then for our camper and patron safety. So has there been guidance issued about camps across the state and how they might be handled for safety?
Unfortunately, they have not released that yet. And what we're being told, we're working with ACA, and there is a big meeting tomorrow with ACA that both Julie and I are attending. But they can only give guidance. We've seen in some other states that the camps that are, the states that are already reopening, that the staff are required to wear masks, but the children aren't. But that will really depend on what our state mandates. So as of now, we don't have the direction on that.
That's exactly right. We can take some guidance from the YMCA has been running essentially camps. They've been really essential. They've been called the essential daycare for essential workers, which has been permitted all along. And so most of the park districts I know have reached out to their local YMCA who's been running daycare, really just a camp using the 10-person model and then those protocols. and those seem to satisfy parents who are, desperately in need of daycare. So some of it might be out of desperation, but those seem to be satisfactory, and they've satisfied DCFS as a daycare. There's even a greater regulation. So other park districts are all in the same boat as Park Ridge, looking at the camps in mid-June, thinking that we're going to move from phase 2 to phase 3 at the beginning of June. In fact, the governor thinks that's going to happen too for most of the state. I don't know about our region here, but for most of the state, because he's bringing everybody back down to convene the legislature at the end of May, because that's only possible in the next phase, and that's what he's going to do, because they have to pass a budget. So that's probably where we're going to get to. And then if you want to reach out to the Y, they're very open about sharing what their protocols are. Temperature taking is a risk, so we're going to have to do the thing where we tell the parents, if your kid's experiencing any of the symptoms, you need to keep them home. And if we think they're experiencing the symptoms, we may ask you to take them home and not come to camp. Taking temperatures is very fraught with danger. Paderma just issued, I'm sure Gail's seen it, under their COVID seminars, they've issued a thing about taking temperatures, and they really don't recommend it, in part because the technology is not great, because there are too many choices about who gets singled out or not gets singled out, and then how you deal with that medical information when it happens. So temperatures, unless the state mandates it, probably aren't in the mix for kids. But if it does, what you need to be prepared for is the investment in the machinery. There are cameras or thermal scanners or kiosks. Those are about $3,000 each. The handheld shoot at your forehead, get a temperature ones have a margin of error that's 4 degrees, and so then that makes it somewhat useless. So that's where we're headed in terms of temperature and protocols.
Yeah, we exactly what Dirk said, and we looked at all those things as well. And Harmony, to answer your question, I think I stated that, but maybe I wasn't clear about that at the beginning when I started talking. We are looking at these protocols for staff, and for each program we run, we'll have very specific protocol. And, it might be for the groups of programs or whatever, but that will be communicated to the public so they can make their decision when they sign up for these programs or attend our facilities.
Great. And I wasn't certainly advocating for temperature taking, just knowing where a lot of employers and public entities are headed and what they're working through right now. I know that those are part of, the evaluations on safety precautions.
Yep, right.
Well, but and while you may not have been advocating for it, President Harrington, I think that we need to be prepared that may happen for adult activities and maybe the kids, because some of the same science bases that inform IDPH at the present have recommended the temperature taking as a protocol. And so if you're watching who IDPH is watching and listening to, that's there. So we may end up there. That's a real possibility. But at the moment, Paderma's squeamish about it, and they're not alone.
Right. So we'll move on to pools. Our decision at the moment, is that all of our pools would be closed through phase 3, which is the next phase, which we're anticipating would be the end of June. Due to the fact that there's only 10 people, including staff, that would be allowed in the space, we looked at South Park and, determined that maybe 2 families at most could be in there, and just do not see that as a good alternative. And we have, again, we keep hearing that IDPH is coming out with guidance on pools and shortly that they're supposed to be, but we haven't seen it. So this could change tomorrow. But we're determining that, with 10 people, and that includes staff, that it's not a viable option for June. Now, if the order goes to phase 4 by the end of June, you know, maybe there's a chance that we can open pools if IDPH doesn't come out beforehand and tell us differently. Several park districts have been already closing, including our neighbor Des Plaines, Mystic Waters. I heard of 2 more today, Libertyville, Wheeling, closing their big aquatic centers because of the challenges put forth. We're not going there yet, but I can assure you we won't do anything that, of course, is against what the law is and what we determine that we can open safely. So we will be obviously talking to the board again about that as this progresses. Any questions on the pool? Okay.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Harrington.
Go ahead.
So Dirk, do pools fall into the same category as tennis and discretionary local units of government? Following the current rules of 10 and under in phase 3?
No, and here's why. Every swimming facility requires an IDPH permit, and they're not issuing any yet.
Right.
So,
No, I forgot.
So without an IDPH permit to operate a swimming facility, there are a number of park districts like you guys who are in this catch-22. We all recognize it's 3 to 4 weeks from decision to go to be able to actually go, because you got to get your facility ready to have a human in it, and then you got to train your lifeguards, all of which are conditions of your IDPH permit. And it's really been super frustrating, the IDPH failure to give any sort of guidance here. The only other thing I'd say about the swimming facility is a number of Gail's absolutely analyzed it correctly in terms of the known information, but here's what people are thinking of. IDPH may give you a permit for 10 people, and Gail's right, that you're going to lose money on 10 people. But if it's 10 people at a time, what some are considering, and so you can start ruminating on this, because it's all academic until we get our IDPH permits, but you can ruminate on this, which is, but you have like swim clubs who want to have, you could do a reservation system like you do for golf, that people are thinking about that. So you have 10 swimmers who swim, 8 swimmers, because you need 2 lifeguards, 8 swimmers and 2 staff in the facility for this hour, and then there's a 15-minute in and out so that they're really not passing each other, and then another hour, and so those kinds of things. And people are looking at, is it worth the cost, because it's certainly going to be a huge black hole of cost to do that. And Gail's right, when you get to even if you get to 50 people in phase 4, that's going to be troubling. The science is that chlorine kills it, but you got to get people together and then out, and that's part of the problem, is they're not sure how that's going to go. So super frustrating, but IDPH is really in control of this one.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we're working on as part of this budget process, is the reservation system.
Any other questions on pools? Okay, our other outdoor facilities and amenities. Once we move to phase 3, we're very hopeful that all of these outdoor amenities, except for the pools, which we just talked about, will be open with restrictions. Again, this has not been completely explained what outdoor facilities are allowable, but anything that the order reads that anything under 10 will be allowable. So we're hopeful we'll be able to open with social distancing and a 10 per limit. If if we get that clarification, what does that mean? Means, I was reading tennis and pickleball, but we've decided we're opening tennis. And I realize we should probably go back and discuss pickleball. I would say if we're opening tennis, that we open pickleball at this time would be my recommendation. But in phase 3, then in June, we're talking dog park, skate park, basketball courts. The questions still remain about outdoor restrooms and the driving range, but those are all facilities we hope to open in phase 3, which we're assuming is after May 28th. Is everybody good if we open pickleball with tennis? I guess that would be my question at this point.
Gail, this is Cindy. I was wondering about that, but don't they have to take the nets out and put them up? The nets aren't permanent.
Yeah, we have one. That's true. Terry, how do we handle that with the nets over there? Terry, leave us.
Terry, you're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, no,
Yep.
I'm having, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm having really bad network issues, so if I drop out. We have one permanent tennis court, the rest of them are locked up in boxes, and so people have to go out there and unlock those boxes and set those up.
Ah, okay. So
Not tennis, pickleball.
I would probably retract my statement then. So we continue to,
Could we leave the permanent one up? Can we open the permanent one or no? One pickleball court.
There's no reason we can't. We'd have to
Yeah.
reinstall the net. Yeah, but it might create a big demand, a lot of people waiting, but we can certainly reinstall at the same time and put the same signage up.
we can try it.
And in terms of signage on that, Terry, if for the permanent courts, I mean, this is another level of, not everybody who has both opened both, but those that did found they needed signage. There's sort of this winter stays on the court thing in pickleball, I guess, and that has to end because you're going to have too many people waiting. So there, you need to make it clear that there's no, you've got a time limit of how much time you can have on the court, and then you need to move off. And so to add that signage, otherwise you get a huge line apparently.
I'm gonna suggest that we talk to pickleball and see what their opinion is on this and make that decision about that one court with them. They may not want to just open one. They may have more insight into, they think that might not be a good idea for one, but if not, I'm open to trying the one, and if it doesn't work, we close it. Is that okay?
The other reason that they might not want to do it is that the pickleball people normally play doubles.
Yeah.
Right? You would only allow singles, but you should talk to them and see what they say.
Yeah, we'll talk to them about that one. So everything that I talked about for June, and I know I keep saying it, but it's tentative and fluid, and nothing is definitive. As Dirk said, there's so much frustration with not getting more detail from, and more direction on these things from IDPH. So there's a lot of, as you can tell, people just doing a lot of guesswork. But the definitive things that we know we're trying to work on and work through. And again, I'll continue to communicate with the commissioners on those things. Now, the next topic I have, which I have talked to the commissioners about, but we will be sending this out to the public tomorrow, that we have canceled the annual fireworks celebration, which is a collaborative effort among the city of Park Ridge, the Park District, and District 207. Together, we made the decision to cancel the fireworks celebration traditionally held at Main East on July 3rd. As we know that there are several thousand people that come to this event, this large event, and this would not be permitted until the governor's phase 5. The reasoning between the three groups, of course, was that and the safety of our residents and staff, and these restrictions from the Restore Illinois plan. We all know that the 3rd of July fireworks are one of those summer events that bring us all together to celebrate. This is not an easy decision, but given these restrictions, we do not see another choice. We did discuss having the fireworks go off and not let people at Main East, and nobody was in favor of that because of the fact that people would be gathering, they gather in all of our parks when that happens anyway, and that would increase, and that was seen as a security issue. And then we also discussed moving them to, a different time of year, but the school district is also under a lot of their amenities. I think their gym and their parking lot are under construction, and then they have school events hopefully in the fall, football and tennis, et cetera, that would impede us from having the fireworks. So unfortunately, that decision was made this week and it will be announced to the public tomorrow. Any questions on that? So I'm full of great news. Not really, but we are, as I keep saying, we're as anxious as the community to get out and start opening these facilities. Anything that we can open safely and within the financial constraints of our budgeting models, we will do. And we'll continue to keep everybody up to date on the facilities, programs, and events. Are there any other questions for me or the staff on this? Or Dirk?
Thanks, Gail. I think you guys are doing a great job. Scenario planning, reading through guidance, making best decisions as this evolves. Had a question about, we've talked about pools, camps, and fireworks, but what about after May 28th, when, let's say, hopefully we move into phase 3? Have you talked with the baseball affiliate about groups of 10 and under getting to have use of our fields?
We have talked to baseball and they are shooting for July 1st. They're hoping for July 1st is their goal.
So Dirk,
So they're hoping for phase 4, Gail. Your baseball.
Correct. Yes.
Well, that's important for a planning thing. I'm gonna just give you a warning. Some little leagues are so desperate that they're considering 4-on-4 play with a coach each, and sort of thing where right field is out. And the burden on the park district for that is, how do you prep the field? You've got a certain amount of run up to prepping the fields to have them ready to play ball. So when you're doing your planning with them, go, look, we're going to commit to the July 1 date, hoping we're in phase 4 then, because we're not going to have your fields prepared. We just don't have the resources to do it right now. And so if you're open and articulate with them about that, because it's that expectation management game on baseball with, they're so desperate they want to play, and everybody understands that. But, we can't just, it's not like a light switch where you turn it on and you play. We've got some field prep to do. And so having a deadline like that's good.
Yeah, so it's kind of like everything else, right? We can't just flip the light switch. But yeah, I don't know. Terry spoke with them. I don't know if he talked to them about practices, Terry. I know that they were hoping for July 1. I know that I feel like Little League canceled the season, but our baseball affiliate is not part of Little League. Terry, did they give any indication about practice?
Correct. They're not part of Little League. They have not given me any indication about practice, but they do realize that it's not just flip the switch. So we've had a number of conversations. Baseball does remain very hopeful, and they want to hold out, to make sure that they get some sort of season in. So, but I've had conversations with 2 of the top people in baseball just about different scenarios and all the planning and prep, and we've been keeping pretty conscious about that. So.
And so, thank you. That's helpful. And then assuming that we'd also be talking through other affiliate use of fields, because I know that soccer, for instance, has had to cancel their season, our house and travel. And I'm assuming there would be great interest in having perhaps use of fields if it's allowable under phase 3 and under phase 4, according to the size guidelines. So I would imagine that we would need to do some planning around what that looks like and what's allowed.
This is Commissioner Leach. Can I interject?
Yeah, and sure.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt either. It's hard. The question I have is back to, I think you said, Terry, is there any foreseeable ability for the baseball affiliate to do practicing in June from your standpoint now? Because again, if we can do social distancing and the governor allows it through his directives, I would love for practicing to be allowed, but I'm not sure if I understood that to be your answer. Thank you.
I'm not disallowing anything that's allowed by the governor's orders or laws. So I'm suggesting that if it's allowable by the governor's orders in June, while we're getting things finalized or prepped, I don't see any reason why they couldn't be out there practicing. It wouldn't be any different than any other year where they've moved practices around based on, field playability and things like that in April, weather dependent. And, we always have like several weeks of practice and then a time where we get games going. So that's completely foreseeable.
The difference though,
if that's allowed and if that makes sense.
The difference though, Terry, is June is 10 people max. That's phase 3, presuming we get there in June,
Right.
is 10 people max. So that's one, if you have a coach, now you just have the 9. And usually there's more than 9 players on a team. So who do you tell to stay home?
Right. I agree with that, but would be a logistics issue for baseball to work out if they wanted to have split team practices. Or from my perspective, the way I would approach it or suggest to approach it with baseball is that if it's allowable and we have fields that are safe and ready, which they should be, that I would say to them that as long as you can follow the guidelines that are set forth and use our parks legally, you can have your practices.
Yeah, your fields
that reminds. Go ahead.
Oh, the fields will be ready, Terry? I mean, our fields will be enough fields for practice to give them, will be ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
ahead,
one dynamic one dynamic I wanted to remind everybody of that because I sit in these meetings with Gail and her peers. Just a reminder, however desperately we want to go back to normal, and I'm making air quotes around normal, it's not going to happen. Participation is going to be way down in terms of how many parents allow their kids to participate in these group activities for a while, and that's to be expected. So when we think of, do we have enough space? Do we have enough places for these folks? It's going to be, I think you're going to have fewer teams that you're going to have to schedule. So that's one of the things to keep in mind as you try to fulfill your mission. Recognize that at least initially, people are going to be hesitant to put people out. So you may have fewer teams to have to worry about. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Park Ridge is so gung-ho about it that you'll still have the full amenities, but most people think it's unlikely. So that will help in scheduling, even though it's not for, really pleasant reasons.
Right. Good point. Any other questions about our planning or our approach or?
Yes. I wanted to get your thoughts, and I wanted to make my thoughts known on the activity center. Given that the, what's the right word? The demographic that pretty much uses that facility is the same demographic that's been by far hit the hardest in this pandemic. And so I'm just wondering what kind of conversations you've had, but one of my thoughts was I just don't see that facility reopening anytime soon.
I'm gonna let April speak to that. We've had a lot of conversation about that for those same reasons. April, you want to talk about that?
Yes, we've read a lot of information and are aware of that as well. We have talked about very minimal programming because we do have active adults there who are in a different demographic, but we're still working through those details at this time and going virtual where we can with a lot of activities. And we're really going program by program, what we can offer, who's participating. We do have some very active adults that are eager to get back that are not within that demographic.
Other questions? Questions,
This is
comments?
Commissioner Leach again. Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, so the only thing I would go back to, and just because of fiscal issue that I think is going to come into the analysis with Sandra and the team, I think baseball, what's the affiliate? How much do they give to the affiliate? Is it like, I know it's a lot more in football. I want to say it's around $30,000. So at some point, if their season is shortened, I'm not sure how we're handling those type of issues too. And I don't know if there's been any conversations with Gary and the team.
Are you talking about the participation fee, Rob?
Yeah, because they're one of the larger. Them and soccer are one of the largest sports. So with a shortened schedule, I'm guessing that's a $30,000 hit, just on affiliate fees if they don't play. But I don't know if that's even a consideration at this point.
Yep, we'll have to talk about that. I have not had conversations about that, but I'm sure we would have gotten there. But I appreciate you bringing that up. It's a good point. Anything else? Okay. So we'll touch base again at, of course, the next meeting, but I have a feeling I'll be touching base with you a lot quicker, as these things develop with IDPH. And that's really all I have on COVID-19 and our preparations and our work we're doing as a team. Again, I thank the staff and the board for all of the work and for the questions and for, all we're going to be dealing with over the summer. This is our busiest time in the parks. So I would expect it's going to be a I know it's going to be a very different summer, and it's going to be challenging. As I've told the staff, we're going to get through this. This is a situation none of us have been in before. And, we are one of, everybody's this is hitting everybody differently. So we're trying to be sensitive to that and to also do our best with what we are handed. So that would be all on that subject. I just have one other item to discuss. It is non-related. Commissioner Harrington, if I could go ahead. I mean, President Harrington, I'm sorry.
You're fine. I was laughing and on mute.
Okay. So I have some good news. Today, we received our project agreement for Woodland Park as approved from IDNR. And we need to review and sign it and get it back to them by May 30th. And then it is not fully executed, though. There's one more step until the director of IDNR signs off on this. So in these times, I don't know what that means, but I was quite surprised to receive that notification today. I'm very happy to receive that, but we cannot begin any work, of course, until we receive that back fully executed. But I thought that was a very good sign that we made it to this next stage and that they are considering these projects that they currently had started within, IDNR. So any questions on that? That's all I have then. Thank you.
Well, that's fantastic news and a good way to end the executive director report. Thanks for saving and sharing that.
Sure.
We did have on the agenda the Oakton Park and Facility Public Engagement Process Decision. Sorry to pull us back in, but did you want to give the board an update on the project?
Sure. The board, we discussed this at one of our last meetings that we were, of course, in the midst of our public engagement process when everything happened in March. And so we had been out in the public and we were really receiving a lot of positive comments and feedback. But, we all recognized and had this conversation at the first meeting after, the pandemic started, that this really was not the time to be asking the public to consider a bond measure such as this and to this amount, understanding that everybody is in different situations financially and everybody's, this is hurting a lot of people. So we suggested to the board at that time to postpone the Oakton project, even though we think it has, a lot of merit. We don't think this is the time for it. And when we were moving through the project, the goal was to decide in July if the board wanted to place it on the November ballot. So our recommendation is not to do that and to regroup when we, get back to normal at some point and talk about it then, but to not consider this for the November ballot.
So are you looking for a consensus from the board on this?
There's a motion, there's a suggested motion on the agenda.
Right below, all right.
That's okay, it was under me, so that's why it was.
I'm like, wait, that's not me. All right, so how about I put forth the motion? I move to postpone the Oakton Park and Facility Project until further notice and not to place the project on the November ballot. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. Does anyone have, can I have a second, please?
Second.
Any questions, comments, or additional information to share? Hearing none. Mary Ann, may you please take the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Coyne,
Aye.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Aye.
Commissioner Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. And now moving on to the other portion of my role as a commissioner that keeps me up at night, aside from public safety and safe programming, finances. So Commissioner Leduc.
Yes, and with that, I would like to turn it over to Superintendent DeAngelis.
Hello. We have a little more good news. We have, I'm going to be introducing Don Shaw, who is our lead auditor from Lauterbach and Amon, who is going to walk us through our comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended 2019. We had a really good year, so that's some good news. And with that, I'm also going to share my screen. So as Don talks us through the CAFR, we will follow along with him.
All right, thank you, Sandra. Thank you for having me on these strange times. I know it's not ideal for sure. I first want to thank Sandra and her staff for all of their hard work and making this another successful audit year. Without her help, this wouldn't be possible, so thank you. As Sandra mentioned, I'm going to walk through briefly with the CAFR report, and Sandra will be kind of tagging along with the pages. So if we turn to PDF page 12, this is the Certificate of Achievement Award, which was provided for last year's audit. We have applied for and expect to receive the same award this year. So congratulations on receiving that award. If we skip to page 15, page 15 is our independent audit report in which we gave a clean, unmodified opinion. It's the highest opinion you may receive, and it states that the financial statements are presented fairly, which really means that the numbers in the report are what they say they are. The next section on page 18.
Oops, that's 8. There we go.
Page 18 is the start for your management discussion and analysis. This provides a summary of how the year performed in narrative form. So if you have questions on fluctuations from year to year or what the numbers truly mean, this would be the section that you would want to go to for some of your answers. If we jump all the way to page 34 now. Page 34 is the start of your individual fund financial statements, starting with the balance sheet. You'll notice the first column, the general fund, that's your main operating fund. If you scroll all the way towards the bottom, you'll notice that the general fund had an ending fund balance of $2.2 million. This is a very healthy fund balance, especially for a park district your size. So to take a look at how we got to that number, let's skip to page 36. Page 36 is what would be your income statement. You'll notice towards the bottom that net change in fund balance was $556,000. This is primarily due to your expenditures being below budget due to a decrease in the number of staff overall. So that 556,000 brought you to the ending fund balance of about $2.2 million I touched on earlier. The notes to the financial statement start on page 38. The notes of financial statement provide further detail into how we came up with the figures that we did. Within there, you'll find supporting schedules such as capital asset schedule, and long-term debt. One footnote I did want to touch on very briefly is on page 65. Page 65 provides further detail into your retirement fund, which is IMRF. This is very well funded and is probably the best funded in the state. You'll notice in that second chart, the net pension liability went from 3.9 million last year, and it went all the way down to about $2 million. And you'll notice the net investment income was at $3.5 million, which really provided that big decrease because it was a better investment year this year than in prior years. Lastly, if we jump to page 77, this is the start of your budgetary information. So if you're curious as to how a specific fund performed based on what was budgeted, this would be where you would go. You'll notice that, as I touched on earlier, your revenues were above budget and your expenditures were well below what was budgeted for, which contributed to this 556,000 net increase. Does anyone have any questions on the financial report? All right, if no other questions, we did not have any current year or prior year recommendations. So it was a very good year overall. And again, I would like to thank Sandra for all of her efforts in making this possible.
Well, thank you, Don, and thank your team. We appreciate all of the work you do.
All right, have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you, Don.
Bye.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you to Sandra for continuing with your excellent work. With that, I move to accept the audited 2019 comprehensive annual financial report of the Park Ridge Park District as presented. This action will be formally ratified at an actual board meeting with physical presence at a later date. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any commissioner comments or discussion? All right, hearing none, could you call the question?
Sure. Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Grau? Yes. Commissioner Leduc?
Yes.
Commissioner Leach?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne,
Aye.
and Commissioner Harrington.
Yes.
All right, well, that passes and that concludes the finance portion.
Thanks, Commissioner Leduc. Moving on to the next agenda item is new business. And Commissioner Grau asked that we place this topic on the agenda for discussion. Commissioner Grau, why don't we go to Executive Director Mountcastle to provide staff insight and update on potential planning.
Sure. I'll be handing it over to Terry, but this was Community Gardens. We were very excited. We had found what we think is a good spot for this at Centennial, at Hinckley, up on by the area by the volleyball courts in that vicinity, and had it as part of the project, the Hinckley Park Master Plan project that we were in the midst of. We have since taken that project as a whole and put a pause on that as well and postpone that as part of our suggested plans to put on hold. Commissioner Grau had asked if we could consider the garden plot portion of that because we've been waiting so long for those, and I said sure, that we can look at that and talk about it with the board. There was Terry can talk a little bit more about this, but our master plan, we had hired an architect firm and they came up with a much more robust plan for garden plots. I'm sure, I haven't even seen it, but I'm sure it would be beautiful because the cost was pretty high on it. But then we went back and talked about, can we do it in a minimal fashion like we're going to do it at North Park? So that's where we're at with it. And Terry, you want to expand on that a little bit? Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, good. All right. Yeah, we began this process, many years ago when we were looking at another park location, and we had come up with a design plan and a cost, to do some work at another location that we thought we could do somewhat more affordably, by having staff do much of the work. And so, with the idea that we are going to hold off on some of these, tasks and items and planning at Hinckley, as you said, we're kind of looking at, would it make sense to just move forward the community garden portion of, what we were thinking to do at Hinckley. And so really the idea here was to bring to the board, the idea that maybe we could carve that portion of the project out if there's interest to move forward with the community gardens, as certainly so many people are, looking at and finding different, ways to spend their time right now. Gardening, we would anticipate would be a very popular thing anyway, but probably more so now. We feel like if we approach this project with some of that same design concept that we had for another park, that we could do this with staff at a lesser cost. We wouldn't be incurring, the prevailing wages because we'd be using staff to do it. And if we had the time, to kind of work through it towards the year, maybe it could be available towards the end of this planting season or the summer, maybe for a fall crop or something, or, most likely be ready for the spring of next year. And I looking over their past budgets, I feel pretty comfortable that while I have not had time to research this really at all since the idea came up, that just given, my understanding of what needs to happen in cost, that I would estimate that somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000 we could create a community garden on the reservoir of at Hinckley, which is where we were looking at it anyway. And it would be the area that is directly north of the tennis courts, so it wouldn't impede on the volleyball. It's an area that's generally open space anyway.
You're done, Terry?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just looking for some feedback, input, thoughts on the idea.
Yeah, so I was surprised to even consider that we could possibly do this year. I just didn't want it to be pushed out 3 years. We were already pushing it out 2 years for planning for a grant and then implementing the grant the year after that. So, but I do think if there is bandwidth, because first of all, you have to build it, and second of all, you have to figure out the programming aspect of it, the rules, how to sign people up, that kind of thing. If it's possible to do that by the end of summer or by early spring, it would be fabulous. If we really stick to not opening up in Illinois until there's a vaccine, very likely that's going to be next year sometime. The location is ideal for people who live in apartments and condos. There's so many apartments on Bussey Highway further west, the condos uptown, and those people have no place to go outside but to take a walk. So I think it could be a win for the Park District. There are guidelines for social distancing in community gardens, and there are some community gardens that are opening now. Niles is one of them. So I would love if we could do this, but I wouldn't want to push the April's group or Terry's group to do more than they're already trying to do now. I know, Terry, you're down on people, and I know, April, you're making contingency plans for your contingency plans. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity, and I'm hoping that we could give you a yellow light to at least investigate, what it would take.
This is Commissioner Leduc, and I would also be very interested in seeing, the yellow light approach, as Cindy put it. I mean, I think this would be a lovely amenity, and in these troubling times, it almost puts me in mind of, the Victory Gardens from the World War II era. So I think it's just, there's something very therapeutic about going out and gardening, getting out in the fresh air, growing things. Even if you're having a bad day, ripping weeds out can be fun as well. And I definitely think this is something that I would like to know a little more about, what's feasible given our current circumstances, and if it is feasible, what's it going to look like and what can we do? So that's
Commissioner Elite. This is Commissioner Elite. My 2 cents would be in part, I don't believe this was in the budget this year. And I know we've taken some line items to the budget already. I absolutely agree 100% with what Commissioner Leduc said. It would be an absolute wonderful amenity. I just would question the timing, call it a yellow light or some type of work by the staff right now, in view of what I'm envisioning is to be essentially 7-figure losses this coming year from this COVID-19 issue. So new construction, new projects right now, I think is probably not prudent given the fact of the financial situation at hand. That's just my 2 cents.
This is Commissioner Coyne, and I echo somewhat Commissioner Leach's comments. I just want to make sure that I understand it. I think it sounded to me like it's pretty unlikely that we would be able to get anything up and running until the end of the summer at the earliest. And so then that sort of begs the question to me is, can't we sort of keep this idea in the back of our minds, staff's mind, and say, let's look at this in the fall with the idea of maybe doing something to over the winter months for next year, when at least we'd have a better idea of what our financial situation is in the fourth quarter of 2020 as to whether or not, I know it's not a lot of money in the way that Superintendent Wolf described it, and that is encouraging because that is not what we originally were talking about, and that's why it wasn't in the budget, I don't think, to begin with. So I'm really, I think it's a great idea, and that's the part that I really want to echo on Commissioner Leach's comments. But I also think that maybe we should. I don't like the optics of coming back and saying, hey, we're going to spend money now on a project that wasn't in the budget to begin with when we've already postponed a number of other items. So I know that we wouldn't be voting on that now, but I think there could be some like, hey, let's pump the brakes on this, as they say, until fourth quarter when we might have a better idea of where we're at.
Gail and Terry, Commissioner Harrington, I know that, last meeting we went through a list of capital projects for the year. And at the recommendation of the staff and then consensus of the board, we pulled off about $1 million in capital projects for the short term, given that we may be facing some financial hardships given lack of revenue and programming for the district. But I'd be really curious to see what it would entail to from a staff perspective right now, knowing we still have some full-time staff engaged and not open programming and open access to our parks. If it's a matter of just sitting down for a few hours and working through what a community garden would cost in this space, and then having the board evaluate that against the list that we all reviewed at our last meeting, because I know that there were some new projects still on that list, and I would envision that this project would just be kind of thought about in terms of what other projects are moving forward that the board has already agreed to, and if there was, within the ability to switch out some. I would be in support of that.
Yeah, we can take a look at it. It's going to be a little while before I can really, or my staff, dedicate time to kind of research this. So, I said that I was open and willing to have a conversation to gauge the interest of the board to see if we should move forward and carve out some time at, in the relatively near future. But, similar to April's team, we have a lot going on right now. I mean, these are things we can look at. I was just, interested in gauging where I should be prioritizing this amongst all the other things we have going on. Just from a budgetary standpoint overall, I think, your perspective of looking at it, in list fashion and against some of those other projects makes sense to me. It was kind of sort of in the budget in the terms that we were planning for it and going through the planning process this year. And some of those planning efforts are delayed and or were not anticipated to be quite as expensive as we thought they could have been initially. So, that was some of the money that we've deferred off, but that could be available to push this up if we felt that it was appropriate. So I'm just really trying to gauge the interest in where I should prioritize this in my list. So.
Just to speak in terms of things that have been put on the back burner, this has been talked about since 2017. And we had community input sessions at North Park, et cetera. So it didn't really, it's been around for a while. So we have, here we go, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I would think that I pretty much agree with what President Harrington said, that Superintendent Wolf had a chance to take a look at this sometime. I don't feel like we need to be in a rush to actually execute and do it this year, but I don't have any problem at all with putting some numbers and some concepts to this on a time available basis, and then taking it up again with the board as to when we're going to go forward with it.
This is Commissioner Tunnel. I totally agree with what Commissioner O'Donnell just said. I would, just looking at the overall situation, and I know it's been on the back burner, as you said, Commissioner Grau, for a while, and I think this would definitely be a good resource for our community. However, I also think of all the people that are Park District employees right now that aren't working, and I'd rather see some of those funds go to them at this point, but that's just my personal opinion. But I definitely would support this project, like just taking a look at in the near future. But like I said, we don't know how this is going to develop through the next few months, and I'd be cautious just to put out the money right now. I'd rather invest in the employees if it were my choice. But thank you.
Any other commissioner comments before Commissioner Grau astutely pointed out that there may be some community comments on the line? I apologize for not opening it up to that on some of our other issues as well. If there are, I'm happy to revisit those.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out my intent was to separate it from the grant process. You know, we put that whole thing on the back burner, so my intent was just to pull it out from that and pursue it separately.
Is there any public comments or questions, Margaret, that we're seeing?
None has come through.
Okay. All right. I think we have our direction. Thank you. Any other new business? President Harrington, are you?
I'm back. But you're doing great, Gail. Keep going.
Good, yeah, I'm like, okay.
Any other commissioners have any new business they'd like to discuss at this time? Seeing none, I move to adjourn the regular park board meeting of the Park Ridge Park District. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? All right, our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.